contingency is a mortgage financing. So it's important to know and to see what type of buyer, especially in this current marketplace. Financing is not an automatic. It's something that you have to work to make sure that you satisfy. Because at the end of the day, the lender is your silent partner. They're the one bringing all the money. I shouldn't say all, but most of the money. In most cases, 80%. So they want to make sure that the property is a good buy, even though you're saying it's a good buy. And what they'll do is they'll send out their appraiser. Their appraiser will head out, take a look at the property, and then report back to the lender and say, based on what I'm looking at, same approach, like I mentioned earlier, that we use to make sure the property is worth what it's worth, because you want to be on the same page. Property has to sell, like I tell most sellers, 3 times. 1, the buyer has to see interest in it. 2, the buyer's agent also has to see that it's a good value. And 3, the lender, which when they send their appraiser out. So once it's sold 3 times, then you're on your way to a close.
Now, the mortgage contingency date is usually 3 to 4 weeks out, because it's been taking the mortgage companies that long.
It has been.
What can I do initially to protect myself against somebody not getting a mortgage? I mean, anybody can come up and say, yeah, I want to buy your house. How do I know that this person is a good financial risk? Because I don't want to take my property off the market for 2 months.
Of course, that's a risk they're taking out on your end. Usually, in the past, we had pre-approvals, and now lenders are getting away from pre-approvals and going back to what we used to hear about a long time ago, which was pre-qualification letters. So pre-qualification letters are now back in, but again, it depends on who the lender is, and it could be subject to, in other words, it's subject to an appraisal. Other than that, these buyers have been approved, so they can move forward. If you see something as simple as that, as clean as that, what you can do is get that appraiser to move in quicker, have that appraisal set up sooner rather than later. Instead of waiting after purchase and sale, try to have it done before purchase and sale. That way there is less risk of the property, if the transaction falls through, that the property goes back on the market and you lose marketing time.
What if I get either a pre-approval or a pre-qualification letter on the buyer from the fly-by-night mortgage company? Do I have any recourse?
A good seller's agent will ask for a secondary or a backup pre-qualification or pre-approval, depending on who their lender is. Most seller's agents should be working with a lender that they can just turn to, and just let the buyers know, we're not telling you not to go with your lender, but we want to make sure that if it does fall apart, that we have plan B that we can move right to, and we can make sure that we can continue moving forward with the transaction.
So that's legitimate, even if I hurt their feelings?
Absolutely. You want, because again, you're looking out for who? The seller. That's your client, and you're looking out for their best interests. The last thing you want to do is take that property off the market for 4 weeks and then all of a sudden find out that the buyer cannot get financing because it happened to be an internet-based company, or, like you mentioned, a fly-by-night company.
Okay, let's go on to a happier tone. We've gone down the road. We've got gone through the purchase and sale agreement. I have a mortgage approval, maybe with contingency, maybe with some conditions, or maybe not. And I'm on the downslope toward closing. Closing is 3 days from now. Is there anything else I have to worry about?
On the seller side, you do. There are a couple of minor things. One is to make sure that smoke detectors are in place and carbon monoxide detectors are in place. It's important. And again, they're changing those laws, I shouldn't say daily, but yearly, and updating to make sure that you do have the correct detectors in the correct spots. And again, you cannot close without that certificate, from the fire department, correct.
Okay. How long does it take to get that?
Usually you can schedule, it depends on the town, anywhere between 7 to 10 days where they can come out and inspect the property.
And do they charge me for that?
Yes, they do. They do charge for that 5-minute appointment to come out and take a look at the property, inspect, and make sure. It does go back to the town, the city or town of wherever the property is being sold. There's also the final water read. It's important that during the transaction that all utilities are prorated, and water happens to be one of them. Also, taxes are prorated, and depending on the city or town, sometimes electricity, if the town city or town supplies electricity, that's also prorated too.
Is it true I can get the buyer to pay for the oil in the oil
That is true.
tank?
Absolutely. Yeah, that happens many times. Most attorneys will always ask the question, is it gas or oil? We'll say oil. They'll say, what's in the tank? And what you can do is contact a local oil company or whoever your vendor happens to be or service person, and they will just basically send you off a letter saying you've got 180 gallons at $2.39 a gallon, and this is what is in the tank. It's still oil. It's like gold.
That's what they call it in some places. And what if I'm in a condo?
In a condo, the difference is minus the water reading, because you are part of a condominium association. What you're looking at with a condo is a 6D certificate, which basically states that you have paid your condo dues and fees in full, and there are no outstanding there's no outstanding invoices. So basically, that you're clear to go.
Okay. Then after all of this is done, I get everything packed up, put in the moving van, go to the closing, and then what happens? And
then when you sign a paper, you have your deed, which you sign over. It says you're now signing over your property to the buyer, and the buyer slides across the table a check.
And I get to keep the check.
You do get to keep the check. That is your money. Minus if there were any liens against the property, such as a first mortgage, a second mortgage, if there are any taxes or anything else that's left over. A deduction of, obviously, invoice from the real estate agent, like you mentioned, brokerage, of when do you get paid, will be deducted there also. And at the end, whatever's left over, you get to keep.
And that's cash, basically. It's a cashier's check, isn't it?
It's a cashier's check, that is correct.
Okay, well, you've walked this imaginary buyer through the whole selling process, and I know I was drilling down into some little things, but those tend to be the things that trip people up, and they're trusting us to get them through that. I thank you so very much.
Well, thank you for having me, Annette.
It's a pleasure to have you back here again.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I will, of course, thank our audience for joining us, and we'll see you the next time.